Wozniak. My guest today is an author, podcast host, speaker, blogger, and founder of Agrarian. He and his company specialize in training and teaching sales teams how to perform at a higher level using human-centered psychology. He's advised leading agribusiness companies such as John Deere, Bayer, DeLaval, Gallagher, and Worldwide Sires. We're going to talk about the top ways to increase your leads and sales by implementing the mindset of your buyer and tap into the psychology of selling. From Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, I would like to welcome Sinjin Craner. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Chrissy. Lovely to be here.
So first of all, let's start off with your background. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in the UK on a family farm, and my father was always involved in agriculture. So we had a small farm holding, and he was a grain and agricultural trader. So he did seed for the chemical crop science. He was director of Dow Geddes. So yeah, I was surrounded by farming from very, very early age. I think represented a very cheap source of labor on the farm for many, many years. And yeah, just grew in a rural community, and yeah, surrounded by farmers on all sides, really. So it's always been an area and a territory I'm very, very comfortable with and familiar with.
Oh, that's great. And what's Agrarian, and who do you serve?
Yeah, Agrarian is obviously the advancement of agriculture in terms of an agrarian society, and we serve open-minded agribusinesses and rural business owners that really want to improve their lead generation and their sales results. So we specialize only in the rural sector, and yeah, we get the privilege of training a lot of rural sales teams and working with a lot of rural marketing managers to kind of get them the respect and the results that they deserve. And we use human-centered selling. And we'll unpack that and what we mean by sales, because sales is done so badly most of the time, and we're pretty unsophisticated in rural in the way that we sell compared to some of our compatriots in other sectors. And we use what we call the rural sales superpower that we think is psychology. So I'll help you with that as well as we jam.
Wonderful. And you also have a podcast. So tell me about your podcast, The Rural Sales Show. Who's your audience and what kind of topics do you cover?
Yeah, so we specifically get on guests to talk to our audience who are rural business owners, agribusiness owners, who are kind of probably listening to podcasts like yours, your beautiful podcast, and all the wonderful episodes you've done. And we talk to world-class owners, sports people, mindset coaches, salespeople. We're very, very lucky. We kind of punch above our weight. I think we get a really good quality of guest on there. I sort of beg and bleed and borrow to get people onto my podcast and really hit the network hard. But really, I want them to come away every time they've listened to a podcast that they've learned something and that it has been time well spent. Because I really recognize, as you, Chrissy, when they listen to your podcast, people are investing one of their most valuable resources, which is time. And it's a finite resource. So I want to really reward that time. That it's time well spent with the listeners. So we really try to drop a bomb of value with our listeners, where we'll be talking about marketing, lead generation, psychology, persuasion, negotiation, influence, all sorts of things, high performance. And yeah, I mean, selfishly, I learn lots from talking to my guests too. So really always been a lifelong learner. So my podcast is really an extension of that.
Amazing. And those are some great points there too. So let's get into rural selling now. What's the main problem that salespeople face every day?
I think probably the first one is their relationship with sales themselves. Sales has a very awkward, yucky connotation. I'm a salesperson. And what we do is we flip that on its head. Now, I meet a lot of people who are really, really good. They're in the parts counter or the service department, or they're an agronomist or whatever it happens to be, and they're in the business of service. And that business of service serves their sense of self. They feel really good about that. Yeah. But then when we put the word sales in someone's job title, we feel really yucky and horrible about that. And because we've had such bad sales experiences ourselves as customers, right? So what we do is we flip on the head and actually say, in order to sell, you have to serve. So the first thing we teach our students is you serve to sell. So when you serve the best interests of your farming clients, rather than the best interest of yourself, you're always going to make more sales. So that's a real maxim, a real mantra of ours. It's a very important concept.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point about, the yuckiness or the mindset. So you use principles of psychology to influence buyers. Tell me about how you break that down.
Yeah, so basically there's some really fundamental principles you need to know in psychology. So if you're going to be successful in sales, you have to be a student of psychology. Now, that doesn't mean you need to read massive big volumes and textbooks. There's some very simple, basic founding principles of psychology. The first one is reaction theory. So reactions theory is where we react to being told what to do or forced or controlled. So in down here in Australia and New Zealand, our respective governments said in COVID, don't panic buy. Chrissy, what's the first thing we do when we're told not to panic buy?
Panic.
We panic and we go and buy. So what it is, it's a bit like when you are telling your kids to get ready or to clean their room, they won't do it because they're being forced to do it. So sales is something we should do with people, not at people. And so farmers particularly score very highly on the attributes of agency and autonomy. They like to be their own bosses, men and women, and they like to make their own decisions freely. They do not want to be forced into making a decision. As soon as they feel threatened by and losing that sense of agency or autonomy, then they will close shop. So when you're forcing the sale, trying to overtly control the sale, you are actually making that buyer feel unsafe. All right, because what's happening is the most important thing you can do is you must not sell, you must serve. So again, another thing that I want to be really clear to your listeners is the problem with sales is selling. The problem with sales is selling. We sell too hard and we serve too less. So what we have to do is we have to signal safety and say, look, Chrissy, we have this system. I'm not even sure it's going to work for your farm or not, but I'd love to just ask you a couple of questions to qualify if it even makes sense for us to continue to have a conversation about it. So what I'm doing there is I'm signaling safety. You're in control, but actually I'm in control because I'm asking the questions. But that's the key. And sorry, there's a lot to unpack in there, but signaling safety is paramount, because if people don't feel safe with you as a salesperson, they won't buy from you.
Right. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. Especially on the service aspect. Even starting this podcast, the whole purpose was to serve the industry, because I work in sales and marketing as well. I just get tired of seeing people selling and selling and selling. And I always say, you need to stop marketing and start serving the industry. What do they need? And then I created this podcast because of that. So how can you reach producers? How can you reach agribusiness in a more educational, more creative way?
Yeah.
And that really makes the biggest difference, right?
Absolutely. And I think you hit on a really important part there, Chrissy, is that generosity is your best strategy. So in terms of marketing, and we maybe talk about how the marketing team, the sales team are like cat and mouse, and each is pointing to each other. One's a cost center, one's a profit center, one's busy making the money. Sales say that, and then marketing are busy spending the money. So we might get into that. But the key thing is that you must put out your best work, and you must show the world what you do and have a point of view and take a position, because it's really, really important to cut through that sea of sameness, because there's so much, there's so much undifferentiation out there. Everyone's saying the same thing. And when you say the same thing, there's a blizzard of information, bombardment of information. What is it, 1,800 advertising messages or marketing messages a day, and that's conservative. And you've got to cut through. So being generous shows your true intent, you see, because what you're doing is you're serving their needs before your own, which is back to my point around serve to sell. So you doing your podcast or sending out free resources and materials or lead magnets, it's saying, hey, I want to get to know you, I want to build a relationship with you, and I want to nurture that relationship. And when you do that, they're more likely to warm it up. I mean, generally, unless you're Wim Hof, you do not go into a shower cold. You warm up that shower as the results. And let's not expect to get married on the first date. We need to nurture, and we need to educate and align it around the motivations and desires of that particular buyer, rather than just trying to sell to them straight up. Because that's self-serving, and it's very assumptive, and it's really off-putting, and people don't like it, and then they won't buy from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your teachings, you talk about learning a second language. So what language are you talking about?
Chrissy, you've done your homework here. It's very early in the morning here in New Zealand, so she's putting me on the spot here. So look, what we do is we learn the language. There's a body language. There's lots of languages, actually. There's also what we obviously have verbal language. We also have its close cousin, paraverbal, which is tone. And then we obviously have body language, which is massive, because when we were cavemen and cavewomen, none of us could talk. So the reason why we shake each other's hands ritually is to check that there wasn't a weapon concealed in there. You know, there's certain areas that we protect as we talk, and there are certain buying signals that we teach. Now, that's one form of language, and I hope I'm answering your question well here, Chrissy. If the other intent of your question is around the language of the personas, there are 5 different personas in when you are selling to farming clients, and they give themselves away by their words. There's certain words that you use. So there's an acronym I use, very simple, a bit like Sesame Street, A, B, C, D, E. So you have an analytical buyer. An analytical buyer will use the word, will be using silence. And they will often say, I need to think about that, because they're deeply reflective and introverted and highly analytical. So you don't rush them, and you make sure you give them all the information they can take so they can make an accurate, informed decision. Then you have a bought buyer. They're very easy to recognize because they come in and you literally have to take the order. You don't have to sell to them. They're very rare, by the way, the bought buyer. There's only about 3 to 5% of them in the market. So if you're going to drive up 100 driveways, only 3 to 5 of them would buy. I can assure you that's what the research says, and it's everywhere. Then you have the corporate buyer or commander buyer, and their favorite word is I want this, I want this, I want this. And you don't talk about weather, seed, schedule price, payout. You just get to business because they're very, very busy. So the big farming enterprises. Then you have D, disinterested buyer, very easy, blockers, not buyers. And then E, the enjoyable buyer, which is someone that wants to hear stories of success, and they hate confrontation. They're people pleasers, and they're a joy to deal with, but they're a longer sales cycle because they have to get everyone in consensus. So that is a very warp speed flyover of buyer personas in terms of A, B, C, D, E. They're very easy to spot when you learn their language.
Yeah, that's incredible. What a great succinct breakdown that is. That I really like that. I'm going to have to write that down on my wall on my board here. So I see in my day-to-day work, you touched on this before, working and consulting with companies with their sales and marketing teams, that those departments are usually so disconnected. There's so much inefficiency and really waste in the communication, in the process between them. So what are some ways to deal with that, and why is that? And I know you started to talk about that, but let's dig in a little bit deeper.
Sure. Look, I think it's almost the unspoken kind of elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I'm personally, in my humble opinion, which may or may not count, is that I'm a big fan of a centralized sales and marketing function under a general manager or a VP. And it's really, really important because you've got to know what left and right hand are doing. I also think I'm going to be very contrarian here and brave and go out on a limb and suggest that marketing is a function of sales. So the marketing team work for the sales team. Now that there'll be marketers going, "Oh, Sinjin, you can't say that." But the reality is the marketing team are there to support sales and provide sales support material. Equally, the sales team need to support the marketing team to deliver that sales support by giving them intel and giving them insights to the front line, because the sales team are out there on the front line having sales conversations day in, day out, and there is just a richness of insights and intel that they need to bring back to base, because those marketers are desperately wanting those insights so they can connect with the conversations that those customers are having in their own heads. So yeah, like one is accused of spending the money and being the coloring department, which is marketing. And often right now, that marketing department is probably under a threat, a lot of scrutiny, because a lot of marketers, and I'd say the majority, don't actually understand commercial outcomes. They're very interested in outputs, but outputs are not outcomes. You know, doing plans and workshops and brand propositions and pyramids and onions and temples and all the things that I've done on my corporate career in agency world as a marketing manager, if that doesn't move the needle of the business, it's not actually going to work. What we need to do, does it deliver something attributable and accountable? Does it deliver an outcome? Does it deliver an email, a phone number, a lead, a sale, more customer data? What does it deliver? So we need to be really, really clear. Sales and marketing need to be working together, and we're all on the same team, and we need to be very aligned in terms of what success looks like. I think there's a couple of things you can do. I've talked about centralization under management. Also, I think you should be running sales and marketing teams together. Now, you can have your normal Monday morning sales meeting and marketing have their meeting, but you need to put them together sometimes. And again, you don't experience someone until you travel a mile in their own shoes. So marketing teams should be going out with sales teams, and sales teams should be spending time with marketing teams. But centralization, understanding, and the sales team supporting marketing to have a line of sight through to that frontline customer is really, really important, because there's a lot of research out there, but one of them I read recently is, I think it was like 73% of marketing material that is produced is never used by a sales team.
Right.
Because the marketing team doesn't understand the market. The salesperson understands the market because they are deeply immersed and exposed in it on a scaringly frontline basis each and every day. It's the sales team's responsibility to bring those insights and help that marketing team get closer to their customer, and then they all win.
Right, exactly. And in my old corporate life, I was lucky enough to work with my brother, actually. It was a medium-sized company, a $50 million company. There's five, six brands under the company. I was the sales manager and my brother was the marketing manager. And it was interesting because we were family, we were okay with arguing, right? And I think a lot more sales and marketing departments need to sit down and argue like siblings, right? And I just think that the way you explain that is so good. You got to break down those walls, right? You serve each other. I just love that. So thank you for that advice.
Yeah, I mean, conflict isn't a bad thing as long as it's done respectfully and constructively. Right. Because iron sharpens iron, right? So it's really, really important, like the marketing team's going, right, can you help me understand our buyer, our customer, our ideal customer? Okay, so this is what a day in the life looks like. Immerse those marketing guys and girls in there, because marketing people often, unfortunately, feel that they think they are the customer, and they often aren't. So they've got to spend time with that customer, spend time with the sales team, listen to the conversations, not just social media eavesdropping and listening and doing all the research there, but getting out and spending time in the market and really, really watching and observing. So ethnographic research, really observing and watching and seeing and listening to what that customer's doing. There'll be specific things that those customers are doing that provide the ingredients to a really well-informed marketing strategy. And probably one of the best advices I ever got is specificity spits cash. So what it is have some granularity and specificity. I can only say that because it's very early in the morning here, Chrissy, as you know, and I'm swigging green tea as I talk to you. Specificity and granularity are absolutely key ingredients to marketing success. Do not deal in generalities, deal in specificities, because those are the things that will trigger that customer to click or to find more.
Yeah, and I have a funny story about that. At a trade show one time with that same company, marketing had just given us all of these new flyers brochures that were, brochures, there was
give me some brochures.
Yeah. There was one for cows, and there was one for goats, and there was one for horses. And, people were coming by, and of course somebody comes by, flips through them. Oh, they don't make anything for pigs. It was all the same product. It was for all animals, but we missed out. They walk by and I was like, excuse me, we can make it for pigs too, right? But, you have to be so specific and really think about who's going to be walking by, who's going to be looking and listening, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what's going through their head. It's just like salespeople, we've got to get inside the buyer's brain. So that's why I talk about psychology. And I think psychology is so important in both sales and marketing domains. It's really understanding the buyer's brain. So what are they looking for? What's the specific pain or problem? Do not, listeners, use the word pain point in any of your copy. That is not what we use, because that sounds like you've been on a sales training program or one and done drive-through sales training, which I think doesn't do anyone any favors. but understand you need to point to the specific pain that specific customer is experiencing at that time. When they do that, your marketing message, they're going to read it and go, that is exactly like me. They know me.
Yeah.
I want to find out some more. So create massive intrigue and curiosity with your marketing messages using specificity and granularity. You will be well rewarded if you do your due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do the majority of rural sales reps underperform, and how can a salesperson learn how to beat them?
Yeah, big question, that one, Chrissy. The majority of rural reps cruise, and that cost of comfort, they're probably paid, I don't know, 70, 60, 70, 80 base if you're lucky. Then they've got a bit of OT and commission on top. The reality is most of them are cruising, and a lot of sales success happens to do with your manager. Now, your manager is probably the most important appointment of your sales team, because they're responsible for the performance of your sales team. So if you haven't got a really good manager that's motivating and educating and inspiring and growing and leading and developing your team, then your team won't be good. So you get the teams you tolerate. So the manager plays a massive, massive role in that. But ultimately, what happens is kind of like 47% of people that fell into sales accidentally. They're default sales people. They didn't actively choose to be in sales, and then they don't study sales and they don't get any better. And then they just stay at what we call this okay plateau. And they get to about a comfortable number where they can pay the mortgage and everything else. And they just stay there and they don't deliberately practice. So if I'm answering the question right, there are a lot of people that will stay in the majority. We sit with any bell curve, and they just stay there and they're static. And the problem is, a lot of people aren't getting any better at sales. They're getting worse at sales because the pressure's coming on even more. So those that lift their game, you have to become better, because so many salespeople in rural are becoming worse. So you have no choice but to train. And also the most trusted professions, military personnel, doctors, nurses, pilots, doctors, they all train for a living. Now, we're not saving lives, but we are improving livelihoods in sales. The most trusted train. So if you don't want to be a mediocre rural rep, you've got to study your craft. You've got to understand human psychology, and you've got to continually learn and improve, because salespeople aren't getting any better. In fact, they're getting worse. We know this from all this research from Gallup and Gartner. Sales cycles are taking longer. Conversations don't have as much quality. The curiosity, the questioning, we're all experiencing it. Everyone's just trying to sell to us more and more. As you said at the start, Chrissy, they're trying to sell to you instead of understanding you and serving you first. So I probably haven't even answered your question, but there's a lot of reasons why salespeople have to continually get better, because so many of them are getting worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, excellent advice. And I noticed on your website that you have a rural sales calculator. Tell me about that. It seems really interesting.
So that is just a very simple, sorry for want of Australian and Tibetan terms, a very grubby little easy calculator to do. It's very simple, and it's working out and makes some baseline assumptions, some very conservative assumptions around key things. So when you're driving a car, you have a dashboard, and it's got your fuel, and it's got your temperature, and maybe your oil level and your rev counter. So 3 or 4 dials. The dials that we look for in sales when we're baselining, like good farmers, we baseline our production, we benchmark our production season to season. Same with sales. We're looking at things like conversion rate. So we've got to be tracking that, because if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. If we can't understand it, we can't improve it. So we're measuring things like conversion rate. We're measuring things like average sales cycle, and we're also measuring things like cost of sale. So that calculator, you can then put in the average sale amount, how long it's taking you to make a sale, and your current conversion rate. And then you can work out the cost or the ROI of investing in some sales training. It's a really simple calculator, and it gives you some really conservative assumptions, but you can see some clear ROI very, very quickly. And there's a whole bunch of data and research there as well to back up the model in that calculator.
Right. Yeah. Very useful. And we'll provide a link straight to that page as well in the show notes for anyone that's curious about that.
Awesome.
And switching gears a little bit, what advice do you have to the farmer who sells to the general public? There's, again, a huge gap there. What advice do you have for them?
Look, I'm sure you've had guests talk a lot around storytelling. I think it's very important that we have truth telling. So with farmers talking directly to consumers, it's very important the farming business understands why they exist, what makes them matter, what makes them meaningful. Like, we know people buy emotionally and then justify rationally. This is why people buy European cars, right? It's predictably irrational. They're way more expensive. They're an absolute sod to service, but people buy them because they believe in what they stand for. Mm-hmm. When we're buying a product or service from a farmer, we want to understand its origin. We want to understand its story, but we don't want to be storytelling. We want to be truth-telling. Now, this comes in, and you're a really good marketer too, Chrissy. Your positioning is so important. One of the key things I could give to your listeners is focusing on your founder's philosophy, why you do what you do and why you do it. And when you're clear on that, you're going to attract the right customers. And most importantly, you're going to repel the wrong customers too. Often, you know, the narrative and the typography and the font and the brand and the colors and all those things are beautiful, but the most important thing is to understand why do you do what you do and why did you decide to do it. So people are looking for that meaning and they want to know you matter. And if you can be clear on your narrative and you set your stall, your positioning, you're going to attract the right customers, and importantly, you're going to repel the wrong customers. So I would focus on your founder's philosophy, your why. So not all Simon Sinek, but what is the problem that you are trying to solve? And make sure that that is a fundamental truth that appeals to that particular market. I would also say, understand your market intimately and specifically, like we spoke about. So it's really, really important that you understand that customer intimately. So don't just go barreling in there thinking that you can sell your product or create a product searching for a problem to solve. It's very, very important you understand who your market is and what matters most to them, and then aligning it to what you do. So yeah, I mean, that's a massive subject in itself.
Oh, for sure.
And also, Chrissy, you would advocate this anyway, be a massive user of social and digital. Don't be a dinosaur. Get on there. I use the metaphor when we teach our rural marketing about the 5-legged stool. Now, a kitchen stool in your house has 3 legs, and it's very important you do not rely on one leg alone. Don't just rely on your Facebook page or your Instagram. Have a blog, have a podcast, have trade shows, have editorial. We'll talk about owned, earned, and paid media maybe another time, but you need to spread and diversify your lead generation activity. It's really important that you don't get just sucked up into the pretty brand story side of things. Right. It's really important you have a predictable, reliable lead generation system for your farming business too. And digital can play a really big part in that because it's measurable, it's accountable, it's attributable. So, you know, reach out to people like Chrissy for really good advice on that in terms of how you use your digital strategy to ensure you're not worrying where your next customer is coming from. So yeah, don't forget the detail of lead generation. The big brand macro storytelling stuff is important. The lead generation stuff is just as important as well. And make sure you diversify your leads on 3 legs of a marketing stool, if that works as a metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then why is it important for companies to work with other companies like who have a deep understanding of the agriculture industry? You know, I know a lot of companies that'll just go outsource, you know, their website or some of their marketing or whatever to a company that doesn't understand agriculture. And I always think, like, why are you doing that? You need, to me, they need to have somebody that understands.
Yeah, I would endorse that 100%. Obviously, excuse my own bias as well, because we only focus on rural, is you need to be in the market or come from the market to know the market. And you need to be immersed in that market because you need to understand the nuances and the specificities of what drive those farming families. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very hard. You cannot just say, yeah, we understand farming, whether an agency, because you spent like your summer school holidays with your uncle milking cows. You know, this is not a qualification in agriculture. They need to be able to set foot on farm. You know, we do a lot of farming panels, we do a lot of phone interviews, we do a lot of qualitative research. We're very comfortable talking to farmers because we spend time with farmers each and every day. And because we live in that market, we live in an agricultural, horticultural space here in New Zealand. I have plenty of sheep and beef farming mates, dairy farmer mates, orchard growers, apples, pet fruit, viticulturalists. I'm surrounded by them. So you've got to be in the market to know the market. When you use a generalist, you run the risk of your marketing not hitting its mark. I always say, when you've got a serious problem, you should be working with a specialist. And if you've got an expensive problem, you're not making enough sales, not making enough leads, not selling enough product, you do not go to your GP for heart surgery. You go to the cardiologist. So you need to be looking at a specialist who is not the generalized guessing GP. As we all know, a generalist is under threat. GPs, doctors, forgive me if any is in the audience, they're under threat from Dr. Google because we don't really believe in generalists anymore. We're always looking for the specialist. If anything, you should be dealing with a specialist from day dot because you stop wasting a lot of time. You only spend the dollars once, not twice, and you get it right time first time. So yeah, don't go and work with a generalist. Don't fall for the big names. I've blogged about this heaps. I've seen some very sad stories where the resources have been completely robbed, creating a bunch of output, not outcome, and then they don't have those resources to fight another day because they got the cost of bad advice is really, really expensive. So look for people that really understand the market and have got the proof points of that and can show that they've been immersed, understand the nuances, and that all important, that specificity of that market.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Great advice. And I have one last question for you. Why do you personally serve the ag industry? What is your greatest passion in what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Sure. I really like seeing people succeed. And there's certain people I really, really like and have a real love and affection for, and it's rural people. I come from a rural background. I think they're incredibly humble, a lot of humility. They are what I call good human beings, almost 99% of the time. Of course, there's a few toe rags as there are in here, but I mean, I think there is something very special and natural and authentic about people that earn their living from the land. And so they're very honest people, very trustworthy people. You take them for their word, character counts. Those are the kind of people I like to hang out with. And that's where I've come from. So it naturally makes sense that I gravitate to it. So I see, like we spoke about at the top of the show before we came on, is I'm seeing a lot of very bad advice out there in sales training. I'm seeing a lot of cookie cutter, city-based kind of training. Doesn't go deep enough in the psychology and the sophistication and strategic nature of selling, particularly big capital expenditure goods like farm machinery and silos and big things like that. I like to see good people succeed, and good people deserve good things. So that's why I get out of bed in the morning, and I really love to transfer my knowledge and train teams and managers to get the results and the respect that they truly deserve, because I want to elevate the world's perception of rural reps. Often we're sort of downtrodden and yucky, and what's he here to bloody sell me now? And I don't need anything. And he comes up the driveway and everything else. So all that yuckiness, I want them to have a lot more confidence and conviction in their conversations and arm them with the tools to do that. So that's why I get out of bed in the morning. That's what gives me a real kick. There's nothing better than my students come back and saying, hey, I used your training, we did your program, and we got some great results. And we do get great results because we guarantee them if they do the work. We know we get results when they do the work, because nothing works unless you work.
I love that. Very good. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so if your listeners are interested, and I haven't bored them senseless already, you can go to ruralsalessuccess.com, and that's got all the kit that you need. There's a lot of free tools and resources. We have a private Facebook group. You can join my weekly email list. There's blogs linked to the podcast, and most importantly, there's a free ebook you can get. It's called How to Succeed in Rural Sales, and it's the secrets and psychology every rural rep needs to know. So usually I think it's about $20 US on Amazon. They can download that ebook for free. So if you go to ruralsalessuccess.com, Chrissy and the team will put that in the show notes. Help yourselves to it. If it helps someone, it really makes my day. Don't struggle. Don't suffer in silence if you're struggling with sales and lead generation. There's a lot of tools you can use there straight away.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was so much information, such great information, and a lot for people to think about.
Awesome, Chrissy. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want to learn more, the links are provided in the show notes. And I would love it if you would subscribe to North American Ag and share this Ag Spotlight episode. North American Ag can be found on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, or our Ag Feast channels. The podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day.